Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, welcome to our 6th episode in our 10-episode series for this year's holiday hacks. We've been talking about an article that we saw from Southern New Hampshire University on the 10 traits of successful leaders. And again, if you're joining us for the first time, please go back and listen to the first 5. They are definitely worth it. One of the reasons we focused on these particular traits is that they weren't talking about traits of good leaders, which can be subjective or hypothetical or something that you aspire to be. These are traits of successful leaders, meaning they're the things that leaders do who are already doing a good job. Their success can be measured, and then they attribute it to these things. On this episode, we're going to be talking about how successful leaders empower people.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic. And it's funny, I was just having a conversation with someone the other day about this. And when we say the word empower or empowerment, it's very much it's a buzzword. You know, it's one of those ones that you put in your buzzword bingo box.
Yep.
But it's also one that I think is it's a real ideal, and it's a real, behavior that needs to happen if you're truly going to allow people a space to learn and to grow and to make decisions to learn. So I very much think that this is a good conversation to have and a great reminder of what empowering someone is or what empowerment is. And making sure that whatever that definition is that you have for yourself or the organization or groups of people, that you share a common definition so that you can truly put action into making sure that people feel empowered.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But when you say common definition, the thing that I think is important is common in that you and the individual person agree on what that definition is, not you and your whole team agree, because each member of your team may define what being empowered looks like differently. This is one of those things where you can't say you empower people. They have to say they feel empowered. And if they feel empowered, then by definition, you have empowered them. If they don't feel empowered, then you really haven't. And I go back to one of the things I've always said is that one employee's micromanaging is the other person's unavailable. There are bosses out there who they'll treat every employee the same, and one employee will say, "I feel like they're constantly breathing down my neck." And another employee on the same team might say, "I feel like they're never around, never available, when I want the support that I need." And so depending on the level of support that an employee needs and what they're looking for in order to feel empowered, that is a big difference. Because when you think of the word empowering, you're thinking, okay, here are the rules, now go do it. Not I'm going to tell you how to do it. It's I'm going to tell you where we need to be. I'm going to tell you what the goals are, what the outcomes need to be, and then now you just make that happen. And if you need help with that, let me know. If you're not getting where you should be, I will follow up with you. But in kind of like the day-to-day, I'm not going to be there to hold your hand. You're just going to take care of it and make it happen. That's kind of like the overarching definition of empowering. But within that becomes, how do you actually support and make that happen? Because if you're not doing a good job of empowering your team, then they will either freeze up and wait for your next set of guidelines because they don't feel like they can go any further, or they will go completely off the rails and go and do things outside of the initial guidelines, and end up causing more problems than that empowering is worth.
Yeah, and I also want to put a little asterisk on that, because I think what happens where I see this maybe be an issue is when a leader will be like, well, no, I'm going to empower somebody, and then they go and they do something, and then they want to go tell them, well, that's not how I wanted you to do it, right? that is definitely not empowering someone. There's an aspect of empowerment that is really built in this idea of trust and values and that type of thing. I trust that Chris is wanting to do a good job. I know that Chris and I share the common values that he's going to do it the right way and that type of thing. How he does it, I might have a lot of opinions on that. We might go through this, and at the end of it, I might want to provide him with some level of feedback or coaching or whatever that might be. But in the moment, if I'm truly empowering Chris, I need to let Chris figure out exactly what he wants to do and how he's going to go do it in the way it best works for him. And I think that's where it becomes either a thing where you're maybe empowering somebody that, to your point earlier, we don't have the same definition of empowerment, or what you're really doing is you're delegating something to somebody. and you're not really empowering them, but then you're calling it empowerment. So like, let's just be honest about what it is.
I'm going to
and tell
empower
people.
Lorenzo to do this thing in exactly the way I would do it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. We had an episode, I'll never forget, it's a long time ago. It made me laugh because I was having a conversation with a leader and I was like, hey, I need you to take care of this. And they were like, okay. And like, you could tell like they didn't want to do it because you know what? I didn't want to do it. But then I looked at them and I said like,
hey, sometimes it rolls downhill, man.
Yeah. I was like, I'm just delegating this to you. You know that, right? He goes, oh, I know. I said, okay, cool. And then you and I had an episode about it, about the thin line between like delegation and development.
Right.
And I'll never forget because like a couple weeks later, he was like, hey, I was listening to the podcast and I was like, was that episode about me? And I was like, yes. Yes, it was. Yes, a full 100%. But again, it's like, if you're going to say you're empowering people, then I think you have to take the time to define it with that person, to your point, and you have to be honest about what empowerment is and let them go and do the thing they're going to go do the way they want to go do it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this. There's nothing wrong with delegating something and saying this is the way I want it done, and because one part of your job as a leader is to delegate things, and if something has to be done in a specific way. Because maybe it's been dictated to you that it has to be done in a certain way, and you're delegating it to somebody on your team. That's okay to do that, but you don't get to call it empowering. You have to call it delegating. So it's really more about just being honest about what the label is for the thing that you're doing, and then let the chips fall where they may. If you're not empowering anybody and everything you're doing is just delegating, then that's a problem. But you don't get to look back and say I empower them to do all these things when in essence you just delegated these things. The hierarchy doesn't exist. It's not like empowering is better than delegating. It's like no, different tasks call for different things. And sometimes it's a delegation, and sometimes it is empowering. So what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is I want to know about a time when you went to go empower somebody to do something, and then the way they got it done made you realize, you know what? I should have maybe given them a little bit more parameters in that, and or maybe they weren't ready for this level of empowerment on this particular task. So I want to ask you that, but first I want to give it up towards one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, when was a time when you empowered somebody a little too much without the proper kind of guidelines to go along with it?
So I want to preface this with saying there's been plenty of times where I've delegated something,
sure,
and it has not gone the way that I thought it was going to go, and I had a lot of I had to step in and correct things. The first example that came to my mind was actually empowering a team, but with the intent of helping them to understand what empowerment felt like. I kind of knew this was probably not going to go great.
Interesting.
But I needed to do it because I was working with a team, and
there was responsibility. We want more stuff. You sure? You sure you want it?
Exactly right. You're right. We don't have the ability to make these decisions. We don't feel like we're a part of the strategy. We, like a lot of that stuff, and like they weren't wrong. Like they were absolutely not wrong. And then so when I brought them together, I said, well, here's what's going to happen. Like, I want to empower you to do this work, but let's have the conversation about this, right? And I want you to understand that that this is going to feel very, very different because with the element of empowerment becomes this element of responsibility and ownership. And it's no longer a come and ask or be told what to go do. You actually have to figure this out and define it for yourself and kind of go. So I gave them a little bit of the preface, but again, it's really hard to stick those points if people have not had maybe the experience to look back on and connect those dots that way. And so, yeah, I empowered the team to be a part of the strategy. Like they felt like they weren't included and that they had opinions. And I said, great, this strategy is yours. Here's the expectation of the result that we want. Here is the kind of rules of engagement in regards to like what resources you will have. I'll give you 2 weeks and we'll sit down and you can walk me through your plan. And they were like, yes. And then about 2 days later, they were like, no, we can't agree. This is tough. Like it was just a lot of that type of thing. So it definitely, was not your case of like, I empowered somebody and here's a beautiful, awesome story. And it was an amazing thing. But the lesson that came out of that and the conversation that we had 2 weeks later and a little bit of the pain that was felt, I was able to share with them, like, this is what empowerment feels like. Like, it really feels this way. When you feel this great level of responsibility to get something done and you are in full control and you are building out the strategy, there's a lot of pressure with that because you want it to go well and you want it to be good. And it was a great learning. But it was one of those that we kind of laughed about it a couple of months later. Like, you remember when you asked for it and then you got it. Remember how that felt, and so it was a good learning overall.
Right. So when that happens, you can react to it two different ways. If to an observer of the situation, who just saw this one interaction, it's equally possible they could walk away from that thinking that you wanted to school them into why they should just sit down and shut up and do their job like they're told and not want this responsibility of being empowered, or you could assume, well, they're not ready yet, but they're getting there, and you are doing the things that you need to do in order to get them ready, and then one day soon they will be ready. How do you know what the difference is between the two, and how do you know, like, when they actually are ready, or is it truly just that this was a team of people that just it wasn't in their purview to be involved with this level of strategy, and they just needed to be aware of that and to move forward with other parts of their job?
Yeah, I think I love people that are passionate. I love people that are motivated. I love people that are asking for more. And I think a lot of leaders love that in with a team, but I think we also have a responsibility to step back and think about it. Mm-hmm. And like, what are they ready for? How can we provide them with responsibility or experience that's going to let them feel some of this and learn from some of this, while, to your point, while not making it overly painful or not making them feel foolish or not making them feel like they failed.
Right.
And I think that those are the things where, you'll hear this from time to time, and it's tough when I've gotten this early on in my career, and so I do my best to avoid saying it to people, but it's kind of like one of those, like, you don't know what you're signing up for. Right. Or like you think you're ready, but you really have no idea what this job is, because I don't think that's fair either.
Right.
I think it is fair to say, like, look, how you define this role, the scope, the expectation, what you're thinking of, this level of responsibility, I can tell you, I think that there's some elements of education and experience that's needed more for you to open up what this responsibility really is, and I want to provide you with that, right? Like, I think you really have to, like, meet people where they're at and then help them and be candid and say, like, this is what I observed, this is what I think, but also I'm here to help prepare you, and let's talk about how we can provide you with these levels of experiences. I think that's such an important thing when it comes to empowerment, because, again, it's a great word on paper. It is, it's something that I love that you said. It's like humility. It's like those things where it's like, you don't get to define it for yourself. You don't get to say, I empower people. People say, I felt empowered. But then by default, Lorenzo is someone who empowers people. Like, I think we have to hold ourselves to that account.
Yeah. I think one of the last things you said is spot on. It's less about whether or not you use it as a lesson, and more about whether or not they come out of that lesson with the tools they need to make sure it doesn't happen again. And so if you set them up for something like that, and they're asking for something, and you give it to them, and you go, see, I told you this wasn't the way it went. Now sit down and shut up and do your job. That's not the right way. It's, this is what I meant by that. See, I told you. Now, I want to make sure, I don't want this to be something that's taken away from you. I want this to be successful. So let's talk about what you can do to make it successful next time. Let's talk about what experience you can have that will help you in making sure that the next time you get this level of responsibility and empowerment, that you're not coming to me 2 days later saying, never mind, we don't want this. You're coming to me saying, you know what, I love this. And the difference is how you bring them through the lesson, as opposed to just using it to make yourself feel like you validated yourself for the day because you made sure they were aware that you're the boss and they should just do their job.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.